really the interpretation questions, thank you. In my view, hold a little more water because they've been open to public comment and properly gone through. All right, so it's question 26 of 395.8. Where do you find that? Well, it's in your hands. You can also go to the FMCSA website. If you just search FMCSA personal conveyance, they have a whole part of their website dedicated to personal conveyance, just like they've got one for agricultural commodities and things like that. Tons of information out there. So this is actually, I copied and pasted this straight off of there and then changed the font a little bit. The link is down there for you at the bottom. You can see this hasn't been changed since 2019. So there's a lot of information there. So it's asking what are some of the ways that it's authorized to use personal conveyance. So a driver records time operating a C&V for PC, personal use or reasons. That's the big key. If I can nutshell this whole thing about personal conveyance, it needs to be on your own time, not for the company. If the boss has you do something, he says, hey, drive up there, and I think we're going to get a load up there, drive up there and wait. That's not on your own time. You're not allowed to do your own thing. Just like there's certain times on the highway patrol that I'm on call or I have to be somewhere, I don't get to go do my own thing. I couldn't use personal conveyance for that. So that's the nutshell version. If I can get big picture, it has to be personal reasons. If I'm going to the grocery store, go get stuff for my trip, that's personal conveyance. That's your own stuff. But if anything for the motor carrier, it's probably not going to be authorized PC. All right, so they can be off duty when the driver is relieved from work in all responsibility. One way I kind of look at it too, a lot of times guys will be parked at a shipper or a receiver, and sometimes they have to be with the truck. They say, no, you need to stay here until we're done unloading, and then we'll let you know. Other times they say, man, go hop in your sleeper if you want. We'll knock on your door when you're done, or you can go walk across the street to the mall, whatever you want to do. Give us your phone number, we'll call you when it's ready, whatever. That's PC time because you're not required to be there. You can go somewhere else. It also includes when it's laden. That means loaded. That's a change that came about. I think it was a 2019 change because it used to say you had to be unladen years ago under the old version of this. So you can be loaded and still use PC. The trick to this though, when we get into the FAQs, it talks about enhancing operational readiness. So if you're trying to get closer to a load, trying to get closer to a destination, you're on your days off, you're going to go get your oil changed or get new tires or something like that. That's all enhancing operational readiness. That's not going to be personal conveyance. Let's see, personal conveyance does not reduce the driver or motor carrier's responsibility to operate safely. So that means that if you're fatigued, you're under the influence, PC is not going to be your ticket to ride on that. Let's see, the rest of that talks about motor carriers can decide if they want to allow you to use PC. A lot of companies don't because it's not worth the fight. A friend of mine that works for a trucking company, he was telling me they only unlock PC on their drivers' ELDs when they really need to. And he told me a while back, he goes, yeah, I unlocked it for 2 drivers for like 3 days, and they were both in violation. So that's why they don't do it, because they're just too, now maybe that's because they don't get to use it very much, that's possible, but they don't like it because it causes problems for them. So what are some examples? First one, time spent traveling from a driver's en-route lodging, like a hotel, to restaurants and entertainment facilities. That makes sense. I'm done for the night. I parked at a hotel. Well, shoot, now I'm hungry. I'm going to drive over to Applebee's. I'm going to take my truck. Absolutely, that's PC. That's fine. Totally good. Commuting between the driver's terminal and his or her residence, comma, between trailer drop lots, that's not defined, and the driver's residence, comma, and between work sites and his or her residence. This stuff about work sites on this specific question, or I guess answer in here, that's referring to like construction sites, kind of the same thing I said before. The guy who stays in the hotel and he commutes from there to his work site, where he actually starts his work once he gets there building the new stadium or whatever it might be. That's what that's talking about in that second part of it. So for over-the-road guys, it doesn't make quite as much sense. Trailer drop lots are not defined anywhere. So if it's a parking lot where you could drop a trailer, technically that would be a trailer drop lot. There's no definition that you'll find out there. So not defined anywhere, so just use that with caution if you're going to use it. If that's what you're going to hang your hat on, just make sure you know what you're doing and that you've got everything lined out here. You can use PC properly. Time spent traveling to a nearby reasonable safe location to obtain required rest. So this might be where you load up and the shipper says, all right, dude, you're loaded, get out of here. And you say, well, yeah, man, but I'm out of hours. I can't drive anymore today. He's like, well, you don't have to leave, but you can't stay here, that sort of thing. So get out of here. You can't park here. We got other trucks coming in. So you can switch to PC and go to a nearby, what's it say, safe location contain required rest. PC, it must be adequate time, and it has to be, there you go, the last line. The first such location reasonably available. So if you drive from Kansas City to Denver, that's probably not going to be the first location that you could reasonably obtain rest. And I realize, hey, I like the Holiday Inn too. I'm picky about the Holiday Inn that I stay in, but that's not going to cut it. It needs to be something, there's no mileage on it, there's no distance, there's no time on it. Canada actually has a mileage, it's in kilometers, but I think it's about 50 miles or so, whatever that works out to be. But we don't have a mileage on this or time. So it says reasonable. So it's whatever you think you can do, but just remember that it's going to probably be that enforcement official who's going to make that call based on his driver interview if that's reasonable. If he can Google it and say, man, I've had this happen before. He's like, well, the only place I could stop. Well, there's 5 other hotels. If you really want a hotel that bad between point A and point B, there's plenty of hotels. So I've even called hotels. Hey, were you guys full up last night? Nope. We would have loved to have people stay here. So just think about those things if you're gonna try that. Moving to C&B at the request of a safety official. So maybe you're parked somewhere that was legal to park, maybe even illegal, somewhere you had to park because you're out of hours. And I know truck parking is at a premium these days. So maybe it's one of those things where an enforcement official, whether it's us or local city PD or something, knocks on your door and says, hey man, you got to move. And he's like, I'm out of hours. Well, you can switch to PC and go on down the road to the next reasonable location. So, or maybe you parked in a parking lot and you didn't know they're going to be doing overnight asphalt work. And now the gas station attendant calls the police and says, this dude's got to get out of here. We're trying to pave the lot. Hey man, you got to move. You can go to PC. Time spent traveling on a motor coach. You guys aren't riding on motor coaches anyway, so I won't even worry about that one. Transporting personal property while off duty. So one of the guys who owns a trucking company called me one day and says, hey, I want to take my truck and my lowboy trailer. I want to take my son's car to a car show in Kentucky. Can I do that? So yeah, you're not doing it for your business, are you? He's like, no, it's costing me a lot of money. Actually, I'm not making a dime. So it's no different than taking your kids to go to a ball game or whatever it might be. That's his hobby. So now I told him, I said, full disclosure, you may get stopped. Sure enough, he got stopped, but had to have a 30-minute conversation with the Tennessee trooper about how he's not in commerce and that's his son's car. So you can do that. You can take your own personal property. If you own the truck, heck, might as well use it. Authorized use of the C&B to travel home after working at an off-site location. Again, that's that kind of that construction thing again, where you're done working and building a new stadium, and your boss says, yeah, go ahead and take the truck home. You don't have to sleep in the truck tonight. That'd be kind of ridiculous. All right, now the next set of examples is your second paragraph on that thing that says what would not qualify as personal conveyance. So the movement of a C&B in order to enhance the operational readiness. That's going to get your oil changed, getting closer to a destination. We had a guy several months ago, came through our Olathe scale, and the guy stopped in Ottawa, I think, went to PC, and claimed he drove all the way up here to Kansas City up north of the river to go to his favorite restaurant. And then, rather than going back, he stayed there, and just so happened his next load was like right next door the next day. So the inspector's like, nice try. If you would have driven all the way back to Ottawa, I'd be good with that. You're just going to get your favorite meal or whatever, totally good. But when you're enhancing operational readiness, what it really was is he was at about his 11th hour, switched to PC, kept going, so he could get there and be parked and pick up his load the next morning first thing. So that ends up being a false log, and it could result in an out of service condition too, depending on some other factors in the false log.
I have a question about that.
Go ahead, fire away.
So if he drove all the way up next to the restaurant and then his load was close there,
Yeah.
you would have wanted him to do it all the way back? To go all the way back in the morning?
Yeah, because it's clear he's trying to enhance operational readiness. He's trying to get closer to his next delivery or whatever I think he was picking up. So he's trying to get to it. So it says that's enhancing operational readiness. That's the way they've written it. So,
I'd like to know if any of these lawyers that made
It's a big waste of time too.
I don't know. You know, that is a good point though. People always say, oh, these guys at FMCSA never driven a truck. There's actually a lot of people who are former truck drivers that work in Washington, D.C. for FMCSA and still have CDLs. So when you see that online that says these FMCSA guys should get CDLs, that came from like the #1 or #2 guy at FMCSA. Actually, we've got quite a few. So there's a bunch.
So now, if I say I drop my container down at Edgerton,
Yep.
and I'm done for the day, but I'm right at, 10 hours, 45 minutes drive time. I
Okay.
live an hour away.
Okay.
I'm going home for the night,
Okay.
not dispatched on load tomorrow.
Okay.
Can I PC?
On your residence, let's make sure. Let's see what number, I think it's number, let's see, commuting between the driver's terminal and his or her residence, between trailer drop lots, sounds like you dropped your trailer in the driver's residence. So number 2, the second after the first comma on number 2 would be where you'd be okay on that, if that's what you're doing. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay?
Just want to clarify.
Yep. All right, let's see, after delivering, this would be what does not qualify. After delivering a towed unit, if the towed unit no longer meets the definition of a CMV, driver returns to the point of origin under the direction of the motor carrier. See that little caveat there? You're under the direction of the motor carrier. It's not personal in nature. You don't get to go where you want. When he says, hey, you need to get back here at 5 o'clock, and you show up at 11 o'clock that night, that's probably not going to be okay, because you're under the motor carrier direction. That's the whole key. Continuation of a trip in interstate commerce, this is what's not okay, in order to fulfill a business purpose. So in your case, you're going home. You're done for the night. But if you're going, hey, I'm going to keep going. I'm done. I'm unloaded, but now I'm going to go get fuel. I'm going to go get my tires changed. I'm going to do whatever. I got to pick something else up for the boss. I got to do some paperwork I forgot to do earlier. That's fulfilling a business purpose. Let's see here. Time spent driving a padded bus. We need to worry about that one. Time spent transporting a CMV to a facility to have vehicle maintenance. Again, that would not qualify as PC. You're enhancing operational readiness, getting your oil changed or whatever that might be. After being placed out of service, so if you get put out of service for your hours of service, like say you drove past your 11 hours or whatever, you get put out of service, you can't switch to PC and keep going. So we do get that question there. Well, how about I just switch to PC? Nah, that says you can't do that. More that says things you can't do. Time spent traveling to a motor carrier's terminal after loading or unloading from a shipper or receiver. So we think the logic behind this one is if you're going back to the terminal, there's probably some more work obligations you have to do when you get back there. I don't know, clock out, do some things, whatever you might have to do to finish off your paperwork for the day, as opposed to going home. When you get done, you set the brakes and you're done. But when you go back to your terminal, there's probably some other things you have to do. So that's why that one doesn't
But
qualify.
what
Go
if
ahead.
they park here?
Yeah,
Like
where their
my
cars
guys
are parked here.
because
Yep.
they go, everything they do is to and from in the same day.
Yep.
Pretty much.
Yep,
So they park their personal vehicles here to go home.
we've asked that question.
Oh,
And we got
okay.
told, just let it speak for what it says. If they're going back to the terminal, it's not okay. And we've asked that very question. I said, what happens when the guy literally sets his brakes, gets out of his truck, gets in his Honda Civic, and drives home? They said, nope, it's going to the terminal.
So this terminal wouldn't qualify for as a drop lot as well?
It might. Do you drop trailers here?
Yeah.
Drop
Yeah.
lots are not defined. So if you can get it into another one, so be it. So, but based on this one just here, not necessarily. But the drop lot thing is similar to your drop lot situation. It might qualify for that.
Okay.
So read it as it says, and I mean, I'm just going to give you the warning though. Again, not everybody does this full time. Not everybody sits in these committees at conferences around, and they may not know all this information. But they might hang their hat on this one and say it's a false log and potentially put you out of service too. So make sure you got your ducks in a row if you're going to do that, and can explain why you believe it's personal conveyance.
So if for some reason or another I end up having to do a data queue challenge,
Yep.
and if it is at a drop lot,
Yeah.
a trailer drop lot, that's what I use in my wording.
That's what I would do, yeah. Yeah, you need to be very detailed in any data queue challenges. When the data queues come in, if you don't know what that is, that's kind of like that online court system. Also a common myth, as they say, a lot of people say, well, if they don't write you a ticket, you can't challenge it. Furthest thing from the truth. You can challenge every violation on a data queue challenge. So Keith writes in with the data queue challenge. It goes to, there's about 8 of us that handle our data queues. One guy, he's a retired mix-out trooper, so one of the guys used to trucks. But he handles them primarily, but then I monitor them along with several other people. There's an appeal process set up for that. You can actually appeal that more than you probably could a traffic ticket, to be honest with you. So we have multiple levels of appeal before it finally ever gets closed. If it gets appealed, lots of people have looked at that and made that decision. So I just say that so that you know it's not just going to the inspector, at least not in Kansas. It's not just going to the inspector who makes the determination. It's going to go to one of us that are instructors.
So if you hand out a warning, we can still appeal that, so it doesn't go. And if the appeal goes through, it doesn't go on it,
Okay, so let me answer that. There's 3 things in there I want to address. Number 1, we don't use the term warning. We use the term violation. Every inspection, if it has violations on it, has a weight that goes to the carrier. So we don't use the word warning because it confuses people. People hear, oh, I'm just giving you a warning. And then they get back to their carrier, and the boss man's like, I thought you said you got a warning when you called me. You've got 10 violations on here. Well, I don't know. I didn't get any tickets. So we don't use the term warning on CVSA inspections. We use violation, but then sometimes there's a traffic ticket. So yes, you can challenge any violation on there. You can challenge the information on there. Sometimes we fat finger a driver's license number or license plate or something like that, wrong carrier. So you can challenge anything on an inspection. The second part of that is you said something about your CSA or SMS score. You don't have one. Drivers don't have CSA scores, motor carriers do. You have an inspection history that sticks with you for 3 years for violations and 5 years for crashes, that you can get that information through the pre-employment screening program, or what's called PSP. You can also do it online. You can pay for it yourself, get it instantly, or you can do a Freedom of Information Act request. Takes a couple weeks, I think, send it to DC. But there's no points associated to you. It only goes to the motor carrier. So when you decide to go work for another company, maybe, see they're paying more, you go to the other company and apply, and they say, hey, that's great, we'd like to have your permission to see your history, your PSP, and if you want to, you can give them permission to see that. But you don't have a score that's associated to you. The only thing connected to your driver's license would be if you got moving violations and convictions. Like you get a red light ticket and you get convicted. You plead guilty to it, or you get found guilty in a court or whatever. Overweights usually go on driver's licenses, but other than that, unless you get a ticket for a traffic violation, you don't have any kind of point system or anything like that.
When did that change?
CSA has never been for drivers. And CSA came out in 2010. They originally called CSA 2010, and then they dropped to 2010 the very next year. So it has never been to drivers. The points have always gone to the motor carrier. Now, you live in Kansas or Missouri?
Missouri.
That's why you're asking that. Missouri has a point system if you get tickets. I grew up in Missouri, spent the first 25 years of my life there. So I know when I got tickets from whatever it might be, it'd be 2 points for speeding or 3 points for it. That is only for your driver's license. CSA is a completely different system for motor carriers. CSA will not result in your driver's license getting suspended. If you get too many speeding tickets over living in Missouri, no matter where they are, then you're probably get, I think it's 12 points you get suspended. So if you get like 4 or 5 speeding tickets in a certain amount of time, you're going to get suspended. But CSA, you could have 100 violations on an inspection, and if there's no tickets written that are moving violations, nothing goes to your driver's license.
But there's no score given to those violations?
For the motor carrier, there is.
Yeah,
They have a weight and a point system. Now, your motor carrier, some carriers, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah,
Some carriers have their own kind of internal punishment. One of the guys I used to work with went to a motor carrier. What he would do is every week, he'd put a thing on the wall, and it showed, Johnny Trucker, he got 27 points for our company this week. Billy Trucker, he got 42. He's getting a day on the beach. This other guy, Jim Bob here, he just lost his company truck because he accumulated 100 points last week on a couple of crappy inspections. So they would put it up there as an internal thing and kind of as a little bit of shaming of your peers also. So, but as far as actually being in the CSA system, your name's in there, but it's associated with the motor carrier. You don't have points associated to those violations.
But those
Go ahead.
violations can cause us not to get
Yeah,
freight.
That's right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
because-
I'm just clarifying because
Yep.
I did get hammered
Yep.
here about 4 years ago down in Harrisonville.
Yeah.
And the company I worked for at the time, specifically safety, told me that they hit my CSA score, my personal CSA score, for 150 some points.
Now, you don't have a CSA score. Drivers don't have it.
And that it took 3
Doesn't.
years for those to go off.
That's actually it's 2 years for the points to fall off, 3 years for the violation to fall off. So after 2 years, they'll be at 0 points, even if you had a whole bunch. But you don't have any points. Only motor carriers have points. You have an inspection history, so I can pull your name up, look at every inspection you've had in 3 years, and see all the violations and what the weight of those are. But you don't have a score. All that goes to whatever motor carrier you're working for at that time. I'm glad you asked that because it's a common misconception, and I wish
Well, that was so
CSA would
wide.
put, or FMCS would put more information out, because I had a guy one day, well, you just got me suspended. I go, what are you talking about? I didn't write you a single ticket. Well, all these violations.
Yep.
No, you're not going to have any points.
I was suspended for 3 days.
Well, that's, internal discipline, because you're
Right.
same deal. Now your company's upset with you because you got a whole
Yeah.
bunch of violations.
But I was
that
told by
affected
their
them.
safety manager that it was against my personal CSA score.
I think a lot of motor carriers, and if you do this, sorry, but I think a lot of motor carriers tell drivers that to put a little bit of fear into them so that maybe they'll do a better job. I mean, I
I
can't
do
totally
emphasize that when when a driver puts in an application, I run their, we have a authorization
You
form
should, absolutely should.
on every application
Yep.
for us to be able to check their PSP.
Yeah.
And if I see a lot of violations on the PSP, that determines whether or not I hire
Absolutely.
the driver.
Yeah, and I,
You know,
I
I
was
might
reading-
tell James right here, James, I think we need to pass
Yeah.
on this guy. Look at all these
There's another
inspections
applicant out
that
there.
he's got.
Yeah.
Look at this. He's got a fail. You know, he had he got stopped because he was prohibited to drive, you know, on the clearinghouse.
Yeah.
And this and that and this
Yeah,
and
moving
that. And you know
violations,
what?
med
I just soon just not even have somebody like that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you know, when I tell a driver, you know, this is points.
Yeah,
It may not be points on your record, but it's points on ours.
that's right.
And we look at those points on our record as the same as it reflecting on you.
Yeah. It
And
affects
we-
the whole family.
Exactly.
Because it's going to affect your brokers, it's going to affect getting freight, like you said. It's going to make insurance rates go up. So, you know, money is everything in trucking. You're trying to move as much freight as you can, make as much money as you can. And if because of some guy's inspection history, you're getting a whole bunch of violations and it's affecting your insurance rates, not good. I read an article a while back too about using that PSP and some motor carriers that had done that and how much better things had got when they started doing that and not hiring drivers that had a colorful history. So it is an important thing to do. And the other interesting thing is there's a big long study. They redo it like every 3 years. I was just looking at it last year, and long story short, they took over 500 CDL holders and they ran their driver's license initially, and then like every 2 or 3 years they redo this thing. Been doing it since early 2000s, and it's pretty interesting. The things that are predictive behavior, they're going to have a crash later on down the road. Lane changes, I think, is the number one thing. An unsafe lane change, they can show statistically that guy's going to get in a crash later on. Reckless driving, lane changes, I can't remember the other one, but kind of interesting. So when you start looking at long-term data. So, all right, motor coach driver, you guys aren't unloading luggage. So then some of these FAQs. This is the second sheet there that's got the black banner at the top there. May a driver who drops his or her last load at the receiver's facility use PC to return to their normal work reporting location, home or terminal. This is back to that whole terminal thing. That one says no. Returning home or to the terminal from a dispatch trip is continuation of the trip. Now these look very similar to that first question number 1 or 2, I think it was. And so what we've been told by FMCSA is the difference is what I talked about before. We get back to the terminal, that's more of that in the day stuff. I got to do things. Even, you know, when I get home every night, I go to my house. But at the end of the day, when I get there, I got paperwork I got to do on the computer and turn some things in. I'm really not off, so I wouldn't be considered off duty until I pick up the radio and tell them I'm done and walk in my house. So it's kind of along those same lines. The guidance for authorized use, this is an off-site location. This is that construction thing. What's it meant by off-site is kind of defining it. I'm not going to spend much time on that. That doesn't affect you guys. Personal conveyance, I skipped a couple in there on purpose. How is personal conveyance counted in the hours of service rules? It's considered off-duty time. So it's going to be line 1, you're off-duty. Which also means that you can actually get a 34-hour reset driving down the road. Because if you're off-duty, you're just driving back home. And you can actually do that. So, may a driver use PC to run out of available hours? The answer to that one is no, except for if that's a situation before where a safety official asks you to move, or the shipper says, hey, we're out of space, you got to move, or something like that, to a reasonable location. Is your maximum distance? You guys already know the answer to that, I think. The answer is no. Interestingly, when this went up for final approval up to the feds in Washington, D.C., it went up with a mileage on it, and it came back without a mileage. So the mileage was taken off at the last minute. Can PC be combined with other off-duty time to complete a 10 or a 34-hour break? The answer is yes, because it's off-duty time. That counts in there. So you could have, let's say you're doing the split sleeper berth provision, you could have 7 hours of sleeper and 3 hours of off-duty as PC. Combine that for a valid sleeper berth provision. Can a driver be inspected? Yes, even when you're on PC. Now you're actually have to switch over to on-duty not driving, and you are subject to an inspection. And all right, so now any questions on PC? I know PC is very contested. It's a pain in the neck. I wish it would just go away, make my life a lot easier. I get why we have it for some things, but I really wish we could lock it down. It's a pain in the neck. So, all right, if not, let me go over the sleeper berth provision for you a little bit. There are 3 elements to the sleeper berth provision. You have to have all of these elements or you don't have a valid sleeper berth provision. neither period can be less than 2 hours. So if you got a 1 hour and 55-minute section, it can't be paired together. It's not a valid sleeper berth. The second one is you have to have at least 7 hours of continuous sleeper berth time. So if I've got 4 hours of sleeper and then I click up to off duty for another 3 hours, that's not going to cut it. It's got to be 7 hours of sleeper berth. And the third piece is it has to be a total of at least 10 hours. There's no maximum cap, but you have to have at least 10 hours. So now you're thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute, you said it's got to be no less than 2 hours, you got to have 7 in the sleeper, that's only 9. That's right. But it's changed September 29th of 2020. They revamped these. It used to be 8 and 2. There's some different rules. Now they backed that off a little bit. So you could have 7 and 3. Let's see, you could have 7.5, 2.5. You know, whatever you want to make the math, as long as you've got all of these elements, have to total at least 10, at least 7 sleeper, and at least 2 total. So, or I'm sorry, not total, at least 2 minimum. Say again?
Does that have to be consecutive?
Which part?
The 7 hours?
Yes, the 7 hours has to be continuous sleeper berth. 7 straight hours in the sleeper. If it's 6 hours and 45
I'm
minutes,
talking about
it's not working.
the 7 hours in the sleeper berth.
Uh-huh.
Then you wake up, and then you add 3 hours in later.
Right. No, because that's the whole purpose of the sleeper berth provision is it splits it up. So you drive, then you do 7 hours of sleeper, then you drive, then you do 3 more hours of sleeper. You now combine those together, you just got your 10-hour break. Or you can do that 3 hours, could be off duty also. Or a combination of both. But you gotta have 7 consecutive or continuous hours in the sleeper berth. The whole goal is to get your 10-hour break, and you can do that 4 ways. You can have 10 hours of off duty, you can have 10 hours of sleeper berth, you can have 10 hours combination, off duty and sleeper. You wanted to, as long as it was 10 hours, every 15 minutes you could go off sleeper, off sleeper, off sleeper if you wanted to. As long as that's continuous, that's one of the qualifying breaks. Or you can use the sleeper berth provision, the split. So they'll call it the sleeper berth split. And that's what you're doing. You're getting 7 sleeper, driving for a little while, or doing something else, maybe on duty, and then another, you got to get up to the 10 hours. So it's going to have to be, like you couldn't do 7 and then drive, and then do 1 hour off and drive, 1 hour off and drive, 1 hour off. Yeah, that's 10 hours, but neither period can be less than 2 hours. Okay, does that answer your question? Okay, excellent.
Oh,
Yes,
I got
sir.
a question.
Go
Okay,
ahead,
let's
fire
say you
away.
have a full 10-hour break.
Yep.
You start off and you go to your customer, and your customer says, all right, back in the door, you're going to be here for about 4 or 5 hours.
Okay.
The driver puts himself in sleeper berth.
Yep.
He's in there for 4 hours.
Yep.
They come out, knock on his door, says he's good to go.
Okay.
Does that 4 hours stop his 14-hour clock?
Yes, that is a valid pairing because he's got all 3 elements. He's got 10 sleeper and he's got 4 sleeper. Neither period's less than 2. He's got at least 7 hours continuous in the sleeper berth, and he's got at least 10 hours total. So the old days, it couldn't be more than 10 hours in the sleeper, but now it can. You can pair it together. You could have 34 hours in the sleeper berth and pair that with another 4 hours of something else, and that's okay too. So all 4 changes that went into effect September 29th of 2020 all benefited the driver, every one of them. They made you have more hours, and then the funny thing was the very next day there was lawsuits filed saying, well, now they're going to make us drive too much. So that's all you've wanted was more hours all these years, and you file a lawsuit the very next day. So maybe 2 days, but anyway, right after. So yes, you can pair that. You can have a 10-hour sleeper and pair it with another 2, 3, 4 hours of whatever else. So we show you kind of what it looks like. So this is going to go through and it's going to draw some arrows in here and kind of how we do this. So the first thing we do, these little brackets you're going to see in these numbered brackets is we're going to put our start lines and our stop lines. And so the arrows are going to be in, and so in between those brackets, goalposts, whatever you want to call them, that's where we're going to count the hours. And then we're going to move, we're going to put new brackets in. So you're going to see the numbers will change. This is how we teach our people to do it. If this is the first day of the log, we're always going to give him credit for a 10-hour break because we can't go more than today in the previous 7 days. It would be an illegal search. It's kind of like a search warrant. You can only look where the search warrant says, and our search warrant is for 8 days of logs, today and the previous 7. So we put our first start line right there in the ground at midnight, and then we're going to go out, we're going to go find rest. Because then this is going to be determining where we put our stop line. So we go out and find rest. We move on down the line here, and we've got 1, 2, 3 hours of sleeper berth. Okay, if you're like me, some of you are probably around my age, maybe a little older, a little younger. On the playground as a kid, you stood there on the end, you held on to one monkey bar, and you swung out and tried to grab on the other one. That's what we're going to do. We're going to grab onto this one because we might be able to use that. We've got 3 hours. But now, what do we need to go with that to get a valid sleeper berth pairing? 7 hours in the sleeper berth. All right, we got the first half. Let's see if we can find the other half. Then we go out here. Looky there, we've got it. It goes from 3 o'clock to 10 o'clock. So it looks like we've got 7 hours. So therefore, we have a valid sleeper berth pairing. 3 and 7 makes 10. So we put our stop line at the beginning of the second segment. When I say segment, I'm talking about the first and second segment of that pairing. So that goes right there at 3 o'clock. Then we're going to look between those brackets and we're going to count our hours of service. We're going to look for 11 hours. If he drove more than 11 hours on line 3, doesn't look like he does. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He might be right at 11. Let me see. I can't. That's hard to see. That's a small line. We got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He's right at his 11th hour. We're good there. We're going to look at our 14 hour. We're going to count all time between these brackets except time that's paired together. So that means this is easy math here. From midnight to 1500, that's 15 hours. Well, that's more than 14. But we're going to subtract out this 3 hours here. That takes him down to only having 12 hours towards his 14-hour clock. Therefore, you would not be in violation. Under the old rules, this would not have got excluded. He would have been in violation. Exact same scenario, he would have been in violation for 1 hour. Okay? All right, then we're not going to look behind us. We're going to put our start line number 2 at the beginning or at the end of this break here. We're going to go out and find rest. There's a lot of recycling involved with this too. We're going to reuse that 7-hour sleeper berth that we've already got there. Then we're going to go find some more rest. So we've got 7. Now all we need is 3 more hours of sleeper, off duty, or a combination of both. Got our 7. We go here and we're just going to tell you that that's a 10 or more hour break off duty. So now we're going to pair those together. So our stop line goes to the beginning of that second segment where he starts that long 10-hour break, and we do the same thing. We check our 11 hour, we check our 14 hour, and quick math, we don't even really have to do the math, because since it's a valid pairing, we're going to exclude this portion there so we know he can't possibly be over his 14-hour rule. Another one for you, different driver, example number 2. We're always going to start up here at midnight and put our yardstick in the ground. We're going to go find rest. We go down here. Well, we see he's got 1 hour. Can I do anything with that?
No.
No. Got to be at least 2 hours. Good catch. Then we keep going down here. So that was no good. And now we've got our 7 hours there. Okay, hold on to that. That's that first monkey bar. We've got to swing out and find something to make that connection. So we go down here and we find 3 more hours. So now we have a nice valid pairing between these two. So we're going to put our stop line at the other midnight. Doesn't matter whether it's there or right here. It's the same effect. If this was all in one line, it would be a little bit easier. But then we're going to count between and see if we have any violations of the 11 or the 14 hour. And this exclusion doesn't affect the 11 hour. 11 hour, we're just looking at driving time. This one's pretty easy. He drove 12 hours that day, so he's 1 hour over. So his 11th hour, that's what 11V means, 11-hour violation, comes up right there. Now this is a screenshot right out of our eRod software. Well, it's one where you can go in and kind of create your own, but when there's a violation, it shows us a little red X and a white circle. Makes it pretty easy to see. Now we have to verify it. We have to go through and do these calculations to make sure the computer caught it right. Okay, so our 14 hour, we've got 24 total hours between our brackets. Everybody see where I'm going with that? Pretty easy so far, okay? Made it pretty easy. But now we have to subtract out this valid pairing of 3, 6, 7 hours. So 24 minus 7, I don't like math, but I didn't get into this job for math. 24 minus 7, makes it what, 17 hours? So he ends up being in violation right there. That's where his 14th hour is. If he drives beyond that time, he's in violation. Okay, so now we're going to move up. That's that same break we just got. That was our 7 hour. Don't look behind us. We're going to put start line number 2, and then we're going to go find rest again. Well, we know we've got 3 hours of sleeper berth here. Hold on to that. Let's go find something to pair it together if we can. We've got 1 hour. Does that do any good for us? No, not a thing. But we have this other nice 7-hour block here. So, well, that came out of the wrong place. So we put those together. We're going to count between. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's our 11th hour. Now we're going to look at our 14 hour between the two brackets. We're going to exclude this 3-hour time. So let's see if we end up with a 14 hour. That one doesn't do us any good. This is where he hits his 14th hour, but he goes to on duty not driving. He's only in violation when he drives after the 14th hour. He can be on duty for the next 3 days if he wants. He's only in violation when he takes off in the driving line. So no violation for there. Okay? Another example. Third example. He's got a nice 10-hour break. This is showing you overall, and then we'll come back to that. All right, so we have a nice 10-hour break there. We're going to put our start line, because we're coming out of a 10-hour break, put our start line at the end of that break. Now we're going to go find rest. Well, I see some sleeper berth time there. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. It rolls into the second day. So we'll take that. We'll hold on to that 7 hours. Now we just need 3 of either off-duty, sleeper, or combination. Well, we just so happen to have exactly 3 hours. 7 and 3 makes 10. We've got a valid pairing. So we're going to put our stop line number 1 at the beginning of the second segment, which is going to be at that little 3-hour block. And we'll count between. We'll look for 11 hours. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's going to be your 11th hour. It comes up right there. We're going to exclude that this time here. We've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're going to take out 7 hours. So our 14th hour comes up right there. Does he drive after that? Is the question we always ask. The answer is yes. So therefore, he's in violation for 2 hours. If we keep going here, that's where we just came out of. That was that little short one that came from the first day. We're going to put our new start line number 2. We're going to go find rest. We know we've got 3 hours here. I don't know why that one didn't highlight. And we've got our long break over here. So we can do this a couple of ways. This is kind of the key question. Oh no, I see what the problem is. Do you guys see what the problem is? Say again?
He was over his hours to start with.
Nope.
No, he's off duty, not
That's
sleeping.
right. Nailed it. He's off duty. That's why we didn't highlight that, because that doesn't do us any good. There's nothing to pair it to. So we keep looking for either a valid pairing or a 10-hour break. In this case, we found he's got a nice 10-hour break. We put our stop line number 2, and we do the same thing. Since there's no pairing, because there's no sleeper berth, we're going to count all time for his 14 hours. So that goes from 2 o'clock until, what is that, 7:30? Yeah, until 7:30. So he ends up being, for 11 hours, this is all his driving time, he ends up being, oh no, wait, let me back up one. Sorry, I forgot a little note there. We actually do exclude this one because we previously paired it together. The reason we do that, although it's not within the bracket as being paired, because we gave him credit for it before, we're not going to punish him for it this time. Kind of makes sense if you think about it. So, so he ends up, let's see, so all total we've got, let's see, 2 to 2, where's 2? It'd be 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 and a half, it looks like. But we would take out 3, that puts him down at 13 and a half hours. No violation of the 14.
So then it was okay for him to be off duty? Since it was
In
excluded?
this case, yes, because we previously paired it with this on the previous set of brackets. Now, if that wasn't there, and that was, if all you had was off duty, if you didn't have the previous day where it was excluded, then he would have been in violation. Because you got to have something where it's paired
The
together.
previous day, he was in the sleeper berth.
That's
for
right.
the 7
Yep.
hours.
Absolutely.
And then
Exactly.
I have one more question too. You said it earlier on the previous example,
Uh-huh.
you can be on duty for the next 3 days.
Yeah.
How? But how? If that
You
was
just
a
can't roll in
violation.
violation when you drive.
So then, if I'm on, so then I would have to have a 10-hour reset.
Correct.
After that.
And make
yeah,
sure
let's
you
say
ain't
got
over
back
your
to the
70.
motor-
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
taking
or
off
you're
on your
70.
70.
Well, I mean, 3
Yeah,
days is
it's 30 on your
72.
70,
Yeah.
But when you come back to the terminal and hang out here doing work for 3 straight days, if you want, be all jacked up on Mountain Dew or whatever. But then as soon as you put it in driving mode, you're going to be in violation unless you've had a 10-hour break. Okay? So you're only in violation when you drive. Just like this one. Let's say this was his 11th hour or his 14th hour, but since he doesn't drive, there's no violation. Only violation when you drive. Okay? And then we get to the end. This is, we would say this is the location of the stop probably, or maybe it was down the road a little bit. So that's how we work them. So we're kind of working them from history, where you're working them forward. You're working into the future, trying to figure out how many can I do. But hopefully that still kind of helps you a little bit just to kind of see it. Now these are nice, perfect 1-hour blocks, half-hour blocks, makes it really easy. ELDs in the real world down to the second, they get pretty tricky. So, questions on anything that I've covered there?
Yes, on
Go ahead.
the ELDs. Now, I don't know if this is standard practice or is it a rule.
Okay.
On paper logs, everything's in 15-minute blocks,
Right.
correct?
Yep.
If a driver is over 1 minute or 30 seconds on his ELD, is that still a violation
Yes, it
that
is.
you're going to?
1 second is a violation.
That would get him wrote up as a
It
violation.
would. Yep.
Okay.
It's a violation because, and the other thing about that, I don't know how yours are set up. Most of them have warnings that can
Yep.
be set in there. 2 hours out, 1 hour, 30 minutes, 15 minutes. So they've got ample opportunity. And the other thing I've also heard from some drivers is they actually like ELDs because they're to the second, they don't have to write down you never had to anyway before. Most did a 15-minute pre-trip they'd write down, and you're not sitting there totaling up your hours at the end of the day trying to do the math. So you're actually getting more time to drive, is what I've heard from some drivers who were admittedly very against ELDs when they first started, but then once they're into them, they're like, you know what? It actually gives me more time to drive because it's to the second. So I don't know if you guys have experienced any of that, but
So is there a minimum requirement for post-trip, pre-trip inspection?
no, good question. Is there a minimum time requirement for post-trip or pre-trip? And no, there's not. The answer is you have to be satisfied the pre-trip was completed. Now, some companies will say you better not be doing 4-minute pre-trips. I know you're not doing a good pre-trip. So, but that's up to company policy. But
Well,
yeah, there's no minimum requirement.
My question is, if I post-trip my truck, it didn't drive itself for the
Yep.
10 hours that I'm off,
Yep.
I get out and I pre-trip it, nothing's changed. For the
Hopefully
most
not.
part.
Yeah, but I do remember my sister had a car in high school that we'd go out in the morning and parts will have fallen off just sitting in the driveway. So I don't know. So I would still pre-trip it because you're still going to be responsible.
Yeah.
Or who's not to say somebody coming and jack with stuff, loosen your lug nuts or something like that too. So
But typically, the old, on your log books, they were set 15-minute
Yep.
increments. So you had to basically set aside 15 minutes.
you never had to. That was just another myth. That's a truck stop myth. Because you can do, even on a paper logbook, if it's less than 15 minutes, you still have to record that change of duty status. You just draw the line straight down. You don't draw it over, you just go straight down. You put pre-trip 4 minutes, or whatever it might have been. Or if you have multiple stops in a small town, it's less than 15. You still have to record it, but you never had to do a required 15 minutes. Yep,
I have
exactly.
a question.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
if a driver's setting out the BNSF and they're out there 4 hours getting a box lift, when they get out there, should they put their log or their ELD in the sleeper berth? They're not driving.
Depends on what they're doing. They have to physically be in the sleeper berth to claim sleeper berth time. So if they're not, if they're out walking around the yard, they're going to be either off duty or on duty not driving. If they're doing any work for the customer or for the company, they're going to have to be on duty not driving. But if they're just leaning on the truck, doing laps, doing push-ups
waiting
on the
for the
bumper,
crane.
wait, whatever. But the whole thing is, are they free to leave to do their own thing, or do they have to stay there waiting on the crane operator? It sounds to me like maybe they have to be there. I don't know the whole situation, but I mean, I guess the question I would ask too is, could you have left your truck and taken an Uber to the mall? Would that be okay? Probably not.
Right.
If not, then they're going to be on duty not driving. So they have to be relieved from all work and responsibility to the motor carrier to be off. So, does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. That's on you. Is it for the company? Do they require that? Easy.
I wish they fucking would.
I'm not even gonna ask that question.
Oh, take the parts off the car? No, she's my ride. I wasn't messing with the car, so. No.